How's everyone doing? Happy Friday. Thank you everyone for being here both in person and virtually. Now I'd love to introduce our guests here. So first we have Ryan Edwards, who's the Global SDR Manager at Allosec. We have Yala Digboy, who's the Director of Demand Generation at Vimeo. We have Tyson King, who's the VP of Sales at Profit Isle. And we have Dave Bronca, who's the Regional Sales Manager at RF Technologies. All right, so we're going to kick it off. We have a great mix of sales and marketing. So here we go. The first question I want to ask you all is, how do you identify who your leads and target market is? And Ryan, if you want to kick this one off.
Yeah, definitely. So we're actually going through this right now with a company that we just acquired. And it's in the CNAP space, which is cloud container security. And at first we thought, the competitors in the marketplace, really, $1 billion and above. So by revenue, we really identified that we thought we wanted to go. We failed at that and realized that our competitors just had more features, functionality to offer than what we could play in terms of that, Fortune 500 $1 billion plus companies. So we've readjusted that now. We're going to play more in the SMB and mid-market space. So it took a lot of work with product marketing, our CEO, the founders of that company, right? And then just also working with my team, the SDRs, who are hearing out in the marketplace, hey, your tool's cool, but it's just not enough for what we need at this level in terms of the enterprise companies that we were going after originally. So we've sort of pivoted from that and are focusing on more mid-market and SMB now.
I can add to that. So I'm speaking here as director of Vimeo, but I also have my own startup. And just a shout out for any E4All alumni. So that's a local business accelerator in Roxbury. So I think when we start qualifying prospect, initially want to talk to anybody who has a pulse, anybody who come back to say, hey, I'm interested in your product. But what we learn fairly early on is really to have a niche approach. So when you think about your business model, everybody is talking about your total addressable market, but the reality is really more total relevant market. And there's a lot of dimension professionals who talk about that. You really go niche into a specific market, and based on that, you build up, and then it grows by community, word of mouth, and it grows to really having a very specific audience. One of the things too is when you go to market, you have a very specific idea about who you want to go after, and 90% of the time, you realize that actually the person that you're going after is not at all who you are thinking. So that's really take a little bit of time and processing. So just adding up to what Ryan said.
Yeah,
I completely agree with everything you just said. I think more often, the more time you spend in the market connecting with who your ideal prospects might be, you start to find that maybe that is not your ideal prospect. And some of that feedback is going to come from your initial customers, those raving fans that you guys create as you're going out in the market, connecting to them, listening to them, finding out what they love about your product, maybe what they don't like about your product, what else they see in the market. I think the more time that you can spend compounding habits that put you in front of proximity to your prospects. So being in the flow of traffic where you guys want to be doing business. I would encourage everybody, whatever your product is, whatever your service is, get involved and be out there, whether that's hosting webinars, whether that is industry forum, connection, meetups, or events, social media, any way that you can drive engagement and be in the view of your potential prospects is a good thing. Whether that is if you're a founder or if you're in head of sales or any of those things, somebody asks you to go on their podcast or be part of a webinar or speak on a panel, you say yes, and you get out there, and that's how you start to drive engagement. I am a big believer when it comes to prospecting that you kind of need to have, for any of you guys that are familiar with Kobe Bryant, he was big on compounding his workouts. And if he does 3 or 4 workouts a day, and most people are doing 1 or 2. By the end of the week, he's leaps and bounds ahead of you, and within a year or 2, you're never going to catch him. You really need to have that same mindset and process when you're going about your prospecting and looking into what can we do to find those right prospects. And that is, there's so many different tools out there. Ironically, before we started this panel, we were talking about a lot of the prospecting tools that are out there that you can utilize to give people extra ammunition, like Zoom info, like their web insights, outreach, and how a lot of those things can double down on the time being spent by a prospecting team. The biggest commodity that is most important for all of your sales teams is time, and how can we take most advantage of that to turn them into a prospect or into a customer. But most importantly, once they're a customer, making sure they become a raving fan of your product or service. So,
yeah, and last comment, I think resonated with everyone is being able to pivot. So you have this initial theory or hypothesis on where the market is going to adopt, but that can change, and you find that pretty quickly. So the best thing, right, is go get some early adopters. So look at your industries that you might approach. Which ones are early adopters? The key is get a few early adopters and understand how are they actually using the platform or the product and the service that you're using, because you might have thought our customers and our markets are going to love us for this. And in reality, you start working with your early adopters, and the early adopters say, that's cool, but I'm actually using it for this. Mm-hmm. And I always think of Instagram. If you've ever heard the lineage or the history on Instagram, originally it was just geotagging, but their initial users, what they found was most people were uploading pictures. So Instagram is now pictures and uploading of pictures, but they originated with geotag. Hey, I'm at this restaurant. So very quickly, you need, as founders and leaders, you need to pivot and understand how your customers and your markets are actually using you.
Yeah, I would like to add to what you said about the MarTech and all the different tools out there. I just want to make sure that who we're talking to, and I think most of you are like startup founder or rising founder and really looking forward to that. Some of those tools are expensive. Like, let's be clear about that. That's not something that you might be able to afford right away. So a good old spreadsheet work as well. Like a Google tab, you have 3 tabs where you put like all your hot lead, the things that the prospect that you think, okay, I need to have a conversation right away. And then you can use like a spot or any free tool out there to put them into a nurture. So that's number 1. You can separate in 3 different sections. So all of that to say, this is great. We work in different organizations. We have the budget for it, even though today's like this year has been tough. But as a startup, when you start, a good old spreadsheet, it can do the work. And as you involve, like you really qualify your prospect, you have like a process in place, you can like upgrade. And obviously, if you have the funding as well.
It's funny you say that, because I started off in sales and I was using Microsoft Excel to track my stuff. This is back in 2010. And then when I got to my first startup company as an SDR, I remember thinking, like, what is this Salesforce thing? And I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world because it wasn't an Excel spreadsheet, but it was just really funny. And it's so far along how far we've come. Like HubSpot was big back in the day, and then now that's transitioned to, Outreach, SalesLoft, Groove. All these companies are really starting to kind of come through from a sales automation perspective. But yeah, it's really funny how far things have come over the last 10 years.
I know. And some of them have free tools, so
yeah,
you can leverage that. But let's not stop the technology stops you.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
Real quick, to get a temperature in the room, how many founders or former founders do we have in the room? If you guys could just raise your hand real quick. Awesome. How many people do we have in the room that are purely just sales folks, or feel like they need to get involved more in sales to help push their organization? Beautiful. How many founders are having fun learning sales? Well, we hope this panel can help you guys.
All right. So next question, how do you ensure you have the right sales pitch to connect with your prospects? And how does this potentially differ between online sales versus in-person sales? Dave, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I love this topic. I think this is absolutely changed and pivoted a lot in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years. To give you guys an idea of my background, I started in sales, I think 15 years ago, selling printers and copiers for Canon. Then I went and did the door-to-door stuff, working for a company called Cintas. And I eventually landed at a pretty awesome startup called R0 Systems during the pandemic. We were a biosafety technology company. All 3 of those companies had a very different selling style. One is going to be in person and maybe over the phone, depending upon who you're negotiating with. And then obviously with the advent of remote, everybody now does Zoom meetings. I really think unless you are a business to consumer, like a lot of stuff we buy on Amazon, I think a lot of times doing the onset meetings, once you have somebody that's engaged with you, to kind of track where they're at via Zoom or Google or something like that, I think is a great way to get a lot of information. Again, going back to in sales, time is your most important commodity. And then moving from there, depending upon what your product is or your service, potentially being able to do an in-person meeting is great. I am a big believer in consultative relationship building in sales. I think today, all of you that are in this audience or watching at home, and people that are looking to buy your products, services, or otherwise are more educated than ever. So having a consultative approach goes a long way. So I am a big believer in kind of a hybrid of the two. Collect as much information as possible. Initially upfront remote. You can do a lot more remote meetings up front. And then when the rubber starts to meet the road, get in person. Go shake that person's hand, meet them, talk to them. And I think for your early adoptive customers, make sure you talk to them a lot and find out why do they love your product? What do they like about it? And you might start to find a shift in terms of what your go-to-market strategy is. I was very lucky early on. When I was at R0, we had a big meeting with Boston Public Schools. We were very excited about that. It was myself and one of the founders in the meeting and a random employee. I had no idea who this person was. He was part of our marketing and ops team. And his job was he traveled all around the country and he sat in with the sales reps to find out, hey, based on what our go-to-market strategy is and what marketing feels we should be doing, is this truly resonating with our prospects and people that we want to do business with? What are the things that make them have that aha moment and get them excited? And does this align internally with what we think we should be doing as well? And I would strongly encourage anybody, if you have the resources and ability, to have your marketing folks out and about with the salespeople, especially if they're in-person events, so they can really see what resonate with your prospects. I think that is tremendously powerful.
I would like to illustrate that. Oh, Ryan.
No, go for it.
I would like to illustrate your point with the example actually of E4All alumni, E4All Roxbury. So their company is Lime and Life. I believe I pronounce it well. And what they do juice. So here in Boston, they're local. And what they did is first, they had an idea about like who their customer were. But what they did pop-up, they did webinars, they did a mix of online and offline interaction to really get to know their competitor. Based on that, they updated the recipe, improved like the juice recipe, and right now they are fairly successful in the area. So that's just an example of what you can do. Obviously, if you have a marketing department, yes, please hire us. That's why we're here. But like it could be the founder, it could be like some very simple interaction with the customer. Whenever you can have that, that's a game changer in terms of like your strategy and sales strategy as well. And just talking about marketing, how we interact with sales often enough. So the way sales think about marketing is we'll get there at some point. But one of the things that marketing can help as well is during your sales process. So for example, if you have a prospect and you are trying to build this relationship with that, marketing can help with organizing like small dinner, organizing like executive meeting that really move the needle in terms of building the relationship. So that's one of the ways that you can think about marketing and how that can help you to win more sales.
That sales and marketing alignment is, I think, some of the most successful companies I've ever been a part of. That sales and marketing alignment was, we were aligned, and people, I worked in MarTech for a long time, and a lot of customers talked about being aligned, but when kind of you uncovered a little bit more. It's like, you guys aren't aligned like at all. You're speaking different languages, but if you can truly get aligned, then I think what you mentioned with the marketer coming along, those meetings, like, that's awesome. That helps build thought leadership, right? Content, everything you need to really help the prospect's journey from educating themselves about your market, your product, right, to eventually buying your product, right? So it's funny that you say that, but marketing and sales alignment is so key when it comes to scaling or even starting an organization. It's critical.
Absolutely. And going back to the question around online versus in person is almost irrelevant. First, your pitch needs to be aligned with what are the challenges or the problems of your customers or the markets that you're looking at. So before you even start talking about yourself and your pitch about how great my features are, or how great this idea is as a startup, you're still building this product. You need to understand what resonates with the market as far as what are their problems, what are they challenged with that they can't get from various products out in the market today. So most of your pitch needs to be, have you dialed in the challenges that the market is suffering with? Then you can build your value prop around that. And especially as a startup, you can morph, you can pivot, and you can say, well, our features are this, and this is how we solve your problem. But if the market says this is the challenge, you can very quickly pivot. So the biggest thing, alignment on sales and marketing, is, do we understand and are we articulating what we believe are the challenges in the market? Get validation. Hey, we're harmonizing, we're resonating. All right, now go back to the engineering team and say, hey, we're onto something here. Every one of our prospects is saying the same thing, that yes, this is a pain point. Let's go double down our resources and build the product to go in that direction. So
real quick, this was the topic that we kind of were touching on before the panel. Assuming you guys kind of have an idea on what your product, services, and stuff like that, everything we're talking about today is tremendously important. That your biz dev team, your SDRs, all those things, they understand that poignant pitch that resonates with customers, that people get excited, especially if you have different regional customers in different areas, that they understand that in the same degree that person that sat in from marketing in the sales meeting understands and saw that resonation. That's where you really are going to start to get traction versus having a phone team. It's kind of just dialing for dollars. You absolutely need to do that. But I think that there is there's a way to work hard and work smart, the same team. And I have absolutely worked with a ton of SDRs that have gone on to become very successful account executives. And when I worked with them, I made sure that they knew all the same information I knew. They knew all the same regional success stories and understood when they're calling into that person, to your point earlier, what potentially that person finds of value relative to what I want to speak to them about. What are they potentially going to get excited about, and how can I either relate or make this person look like a rock star potentially by what I am offering? So all of these things, I think, are very all encompassing, which is why I always go back to that kind of compounding effect of doing a lot of these little things is how you really get on the same page. I loved your talking about how having sales and marketing and biz dev and everything in alignment. I think when you do that, it's very similar to a car engine, and that's going to be the difference between eventually driving a Lamborghini or a car that you're hearing backfire that's stumbling, it's not really starting, it's struggling to go. When it's struggling to go, that's really going to be where you have all these teams that aren't quite in alignment. I think having communication and people involved in seeing that frontline difference. If and when you guys have the ability to attend in-person events, I think it's very important that a lot of people from those different departments are there and can see what the reaction is, because that in-person opportunity, no matter how many times we do a recap meeting at some point about something, that does not translate as that in-person experience.
Yeah. And I want to add, actually define what sells. So we often think about when a prospect comes in, it goes from marketing. So you think about like the prospect acquisition journey, come from marketing. At some point, we pass it over to sales. But one of the things that we always forget about sales, and that's open to debate, is account manager and CSM are also part of sales. So once you have the deal, once you sign a deal with a client and it become a customer, there's a whole entire journey down there where you think about like renewal, and that's what account manager and CSM, that's their job. That's like really nurturing the conversation and making sure that whatever the salespeople, you guys promise to this customer, like your account manager and CSM will deliver on it. So when we think about sales, let's not just think about account executive or SDR, inbound SDR, outbound SDR. Let's think about account manager and CSM as well. So that's really important. So you think about like your prospect all the way to after they sign the contract, what's happened with them? How do we nurture them and make sure that they've renewed?
And for the founders, sorry, Ryan. For the founders, that's for you. Don't just toss the ball over to sales and marketing and say that's your job. This comes from the founder all the way through the entire company. The founder sets the pace, sets the direction, the pitch, the value prop. Everything needs to be founder led if you want that company, or if you want your entire team to be all on the same page, communicating the same thing, and being effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to your point too, what I was going to add on to that was, post sale, right, is so important, especially in today's economy, right? It is so important to keep a customer, because it's not like the old days when, we were dialing for dollars and you could just, customer acquisition was like left and right. It's not like that now. Deals are much harder to come by. So keeping your customers happy, your NPS scores, like all of those things are insanely critical to keeping the business healthy, profitable. And obviously, customer acquisition is still key, but I feel like right now it is so important to keep your customers happy and to keep that revenue coming in. Obviously, upsell, cross-sell is great too, but at least if you can manage that account and keep them a happy customer, it's going to help you a heck of a lot better down the road. If you're, churning left and right, like your net new acquisition team is not going to be able to keep up in this climate right now. There's no way.
Yeah, and it's going to bite you. It's going to come back and bite you on the sales side. So.
Yep.
Getting into the whole hot, remote or in person, some of my greatest successes have come from embracing, whether it's a national service director and their team's going to take over this account eventually, or it's a customer success manager, embracing those people early on in the sales process, edifying them to your prospect. A few months ago was in front of a big casino trying to do a deal, and I purposely brought the national service director with me, because his team was a group of rock stars and did a great job retaining customers and taking care of things. And I would joke with him that, hey, I'm just here to help you guys make the right decision. This is the guy that's going to save you if and when something hits the fan and you guys need help with something, you have a site go down, or something needs to occur. This is the team of rock stars that's going to make this go around. When I was at a biosafety technology company and we're doing the on-site training to teach them how to use the technology, I made sure well before that, all the ops people and folks that are in charge of whatever service or technology they're onboarding, they knew who the customer success guy was, and that they were thrilled to reach out to him, to talk to him, to embrace it. That's where you're going to see a stronger adoption of your product. And that's very much to your point, where you go from not just winning a sales deal, but creating a raving fan. At the end of the day, that should be all of your goals when you guys are prospecting. Once the deal is closed, you guys you got to run through the back of the end zone. You want them to be a raving fan, because that raving fan is then a lead generation opportunity for you guys, where they're going to tell other people about you. Marketing can work with them to talk about regional success stories and stuff like that. And that is really where you start to see that compounding effect on all of your efforts. So.
One last thing for sales relying heavily on marketing is the competitive landscape. So to be able to articulate your value prop and your pitch, you will come across as naive if you just come out and say, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. Meanwhile, your competitor is doing the same exact thing. So it's very important for sales to have clear competitive landscape for marketing typically. And sales can give feedback, obviously, from customer inputs, but understand the competitive landscape, understand exactly where you fit and where you differ. Because if you, again, just say, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, you're going to land pretty flat and look naive. So have a competitive landscape, understand where the white space is, in the market where you can differentiate and where you can play.
Mhm.
And really, I think you mentioned the word niche. Where can you find those niches where you stand out above the rest? And that's where you focus your time and your pitch.
Yep, I want to dig into that a little bit pertaining to the pitch, actually. So I want to get how people feel about using sales decks as a part of the discovery process.
Wow, hot topic.
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways to go about it. Like in my time at Cintas, I had kind of a pitch deck where there was an idea you're going to go through, you're going to ask a lot of questions to gain information and stuff like that. I think in person, you can use a pitch deck a little bit differently, depending upon what the audience is. Maybe you're educating them on the company and that you guys have your stuff together, for lack of a better term. I think that the initial onset, I'm a big believer in sometimes less is more, depending upon your audience, and you really need to gauge, is this going to be a good fit for them? Is this something that's really of interest to them? And then making sure on the other side of the table, meaning your prospects, you get the right people in the room that can make decisions and have that conversation. So you should be gearing up for that next meeting. I think providing content is good, but I think less is more when it comes to onset slide decks. Bullet points, notes, and keep the progress going, and also hold them accountable on next steps is sort of where I lay on that. I'm not sure if that's popular or not.
I'm with you. A pitch deck to me is nothing more than a framework. So I have 5 to 10 slides, nothing more, at least for the introduction, initial meeting. But you need at least a little bit of framework to keep the conversation in check, and so you can not go off into the weeds or let the conversation go into wherever it's not productive. So having at least a pitch deck that formalizes some of the conversation points, but nothing more than 5 to 10 tops. And it just gives some structure, but you really want to keep those initial meetings to be a discussion. And whether the discussion is, hey, let me actually do a quick little drive through of our software or whatever, if there's something that you can kind of show and pivot out of the PowerPoint. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about here, and then jump back into, here's the framework for our conversation. That's where the pitch deck, I think, just keeps things nice and tight.
Yeah, I think discussion's key with pitch decks, right? Mm-hmm. Death by PowerPoint is something that nobody wants. And I remember I worked at a company where the slide deck was 180 slides. And it was, we always set 90-minute meetings with the customer. And it was the most painful thing I think I've ever been through in my entire life. And don't do that. Yeah, just don't. So yeah, I think 5, 10 slides is great. But the key though is having a discussion that flows, that's not centered on reading directly from the PowerPoint or having the PowerPoint be the focal point of your discussion. So it's got to flow, which is tough. It's not, not everybody can do that either. But yeah, death by PowerPoint is something that nobody wants these days.
Yeah. I mean, I was only marketing person, so I was not sure if this question was for me as well. But I mean, yeah, definitely that's PowerPoint. I've seen a couple of things where like the deck are fairly heavy, and we lose that. Remember when you're selling to a person. Like you're selling to a person, like it could be like a dad, a mom, like they might not want to be there. Like, let's be honest about that. So like, just keep that in mind and make sure that you don't waste their time for sure.
There's no amount of slides I feel like that are going to help you sell a product if you don't know who that person is, what matters to them, what they're looking to achieve, why they're looking to achieve that, what that's going to help them do in their business. All of those things. If you don't understand that, like a great slide deck doesn't mean jack. It really doesn't. So I think the upfront work, discovery, a discussion with that PowerPoint deck, right? It should really be focused on all of those things. Mm-hmm. So you prove that hey, I understand you, right? We work with people just like you, and I understand you. Yeah. Not like, hey, here's a 10 slide deck that has nothing to do with what you care about or what you're looking to achieve, but I'm going to throw it in front of you anyways. It's never going to get you anywhere.
And to comment to that, one of the things that buyer hates the most is double discovery. So, for example, in your sales process, you have an inbound SDRs and you have an AE. And guess what? They're asking the same question twice. So you're going through the process over again. And that's the thing where you need to think about what's the infrastructure you're putting in place for this to not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're using one of the tools that we mentioned earlier, making sure that this information is tracked and passed down properly from inbound SDR to AEs, etc., depending on the tools that you use, or again, a good old spreadsheet. I'm joking here, but like very likely, like that's really, because that's really messed up the experience for the customer, and that kind of delete all the work that marketing and sales may have done in the process.
To that point, I think one of the best practices is, if you have a short bullet point presentation, somewhere in that 5 to 10 slide range, you have that initial conversation. I was very lucky enough at one point to have an awesome SDR that he would then, let's just assume you've booked the next meeting and stuff like that. He would then send that slide deck to the person in a brief kind of synopsis of some of the information that got covered in a short bullet point email, and made sure, 4 or 5 of you in that next meeting that you guys got CC'd on that, so that everybody's kind of up to date on that information. You can't guarantee everyone's going to look at it, so sometimes you got to do a little recap. But to not have recap fatigue, it helps to get people that information. The other day, I came up here and sat in and watched one of the panels, and they were talking about founders and pitch decks specifically for getting some money out of those VCs or crowdfunding and stuff like that. Very, very, very similar. Hey guys, don't kill us with tons of slides and PowerPoint fatigue and stuff like that. We want to build some familiarity with what you guys are doing, get an understanding if this is for us, but most importantly, to your point, know who your audience is, know who you're sitting down in front of, and keeping it conversational definitely can lead to, I think, more good things than bad things if you're looking at PowerPoint fatigue versus just keeping it conversational and potentially interactive. Most of the time, those folks that are having a conversation with you, they're buying in, they're curious, and if they're engaging with you, that's a good sign for moving things along.
Yeah. And today's buyer is fairly educated. I mean, some of you are at a startup level, so it might not be the fact for you, but think about like the buyer most of the time before they get to you, before they get to sales, they did a lot of research. They talk to people, they talk to their friends, their community, even before they got to sales. So it does happen in some fact where the customer or the person actually fairly a lot about the product. So just keep that in mind as well when you think about sales. The person in front of you might know as much or more.
Even for the startups that don't have that brand awareness, or maybe buyers that are more educated, which I totally like. Buyer education is way above where it was 5 to 10 years ago, way ahead of it. But even if you don't have that, thought leadership's been, I think, a huge thing in the last 5 years that's really evolved out of marketing and sales. On sales side, it's the LinkedIn influencers, right? It's how many followers do you have on LinkedIn, or what content do you, thought leadership that you post on LinkedIn, which we can debate that for hours, whatever. But thought leadership is, I think, over the last 5 years, so critical to building your business, and not just like, again, pitch slapping your prospects, but really bringing in, thought leaders in your space and educating, them on what you guys do. And then also educating your marketplace. You have to educate the marketplace on what you do as well. And if you can't do that, it's going to be tough. So yeah, education and thought leadership, I think, especially from a startup, is huge trying to build the business.
So the pitch deck, I think we're all agreeing that you still need some form of a pitch deck in some form or fashion. The 3 things that I would say that people make a decision on that you need to incorporate into your pitch deck, and as well as just your overall communication. But the nice thing about a pitch deck is you can leave it behind and then they can distribute it amongst their peers. But the 3 things that you always need to make sure you touch on, people will make a decision on, are you credible? So are you a thought leader? Are you credible in the space? Are you relevant? Does it actually solve my problem? If not, if you're solving someone else's problem, then, hey, you're cool, but you're not for me. The last one is, do they like you? Are you someone that they want to do business with? Because you could have the best product on the planet, And if you're just a jerk, I'm not going to do business with you. So in your pitch and in your presentation and the whole marketing personas of who you convey yourself as a company, do they want to do business with you? So are you credible? Are you relevant? And are you likable? Make sure you incorporate that into any type of deck or pitch.
It also puts you in the bucket of a need to have versus a nice to have. If you're a nice to have, your CFO or even some of you founders are going to be like, maybe I don't spend the money on it, right? It's not a must have, right? If you can make yourself a must have solution, and it's not just, sure, it's a lot to do with your product. Definitely don't get me wrong in the problems that you solve. But again, to your point too, if you're likable, you do business, you have credibility, right? Everybody talks to each other as well too. So buyers talk to, if you're selling to a CFO, they're going to talk to other CFOs. They're going to, and they're going to say, hey, have you heard of this company or what? What have you heard, right? There's LinkedIn groups, there's meetup groups. All of those things exist now where really a long time ago they didn't. So if you can become a must-have or a nice, not a nice-to-have, but a must-have, you're going to win way more business too.
Yeah, and I think LinkedIn actually did a research on that earlier this year. They actually look at the sales cycle and like the deals that close, and companies with brand equity have like higher propensity to close, to win, because further in the cycle, what's really matter, to your point, at some point is like, okay, we talk about price, okay, we talk about this and all the features that you check all the boxes. And what really makes the difference is brand equity at some point. And brand equity, to your point, is based on, okay, who you are, what your company is, but also who you are personally. And that's what you can make the difference. And at any level, it could be also at the startup level. It's not just like the big organization or larger one that we're in.
That's why, to that point too, it's also critical about, sir, for some of you founders, right? Your hires, some of your first hires that critical to your business is hiring the right people off the bat, and even people that are in established businesses, hiring the right people there too, because it's just as important obviously to grow a business than to start one, but hiring the right people can be a difference maker there too. People that believe in your product, that can sell that product, right? But that also are likable people too, right? So yeah, that's a big part, I feel like, as well.
And coming back to qualifying your prospects, the personality of your company will attract a certain set of prospects. So depending on what culture you as founders create within your company, that will attract and draw similar personalities. So if you're an aggressive, in-your-face type of company, guess what? You're probably going to bulldoze over a lot of the prospects who are very calm and relaxed. So, and it's not one wrong or right. It's just the culture that you create is going to attract that type of customer.
So going back to the topic of knowing your buyer. So this is for the founders in the room. Tyson, when starting a new company, who do you think you should go after first?
I think you alluded to this. Anyone with a pulse, anyone with a heartbeat.
Anyone who move.
And actually, the second part of that is anyone with a credit card, and the heartbeat is optional.
Anybody that looks in your general direction. Yeah.
As founders, utilize your network, utilize your personal connections. You came up with this idea probably based on some previous experiences. So approach those former colleagues or acquaintances in your network and say, I'm credible. We've worked on this together, or you know why this idea came about. And you need to put your own credibility, personal credibility on the line for friends and family. Help me out, right? Give me a chance to prove this out and to earn business. So as a founder, it's very critical that you go and get those initial founder sales. You can't just hire a salesperson and say, you go take care of this. You as the founder need to put your sales hat on. And I can tell you firsthand, when I think of all the startups that I've engaged with and worked with, the founders that become comfortable, and very few founders are comfortable selling right out of the gate. So if you can get comfortable and become good at selling. The founders that are good at that, again, it just sets the pace for the rest of the company to follow suit. But for the founders, again, utilize your network and utilize the folks that you know. And I always equate it to, if there's a beach next door, why do you need to fly to Thailand to go to a beach? Just utilize the folks right in your backyard, and go there. And then as time goes on, I will say, realize that those friends and family and those initial early adopters that you've convinced to work with you, they might not be with you for the long haul, because they're probably going to get fatigued with, as a startup, you're going to be improving and improving, and they're going to say, all right, I'm tired. They're going to call timeout. And so just realize that those customers, original customers, won't necessarily be customers for the long haul. So don't take it personally, right? Mm-hmm. Engage them, learn from them, but then know when to say, okay, we're moving on.
Yeah. I want to piggyback or just give an example as a founder myself as well. So some of my first sales were in my community. Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I did E4All 2021 actually, and one of my first sales within the Boston public school program was actually a person who did the accelerator with me. So that's really how it works. And then to your point about those people might not stay with you for the long haul, it's up to you to really make sure that you deliver a top-notch product. But then there is a domino effect, because this is your first customer, and then you milk the hell out of them. You milk them. You do everything you can. You do like infographic, case study. You put it on LinkedIn. Like this is your chance. So they might not stay with you for the long haul, but they're the ones that are gonna help you put your marketing and sales infrastructure in place.
I can't emphatically agree more with that whatsoever. I think that 1,000% is how you need to go to market. Once you get out there and you find people that are passionate and excited about your product, you need to 10x down on them and their story, and you need to make sure people know why they're excited about you, what you did for them. I was lucky enough to have an experience like that a couple years ago in New Jersey. I was at a conference and we had somebody that needed our products and services. And this woman was over the moon excited about what we were able to do about them. And then lo and behold, she was also extremely happy to share that with her peers. The value of having regional references from people that have credibility, that are excited about you and are just happy to tell their peers about whatever your product or service was and the value it brought for them, and that their peers should, at the very least, listen to you, give you a moment, take, for no other reason, just take a meeting and listen, because I found value in what they provided. You will be surprised how far those type of regional references go. Yes, does somebody in Boston or New York City care why somebody adopted your product or services in Las Vegas? Not always. Somebody in Providence, they're probably going to start to pay attention a little bit. Somebody from Vermont, New Hampshire, they're going to pay attention a little bit. Somebody from Philadelphia, possibly. It all depends upon how can you get them to relate to your product and your buyer and your prospects. But I can't emphatically agree more. Having your initial customers become raving fans is huge, and doing whatever you do to make that happen and listening to them. I worked for a company and we wanted to branch into a new vertical at one point. And we had no customers in that particular vertical at all whatsoever. And I had a litany of people in my cell phone that I could just pick it up, call, and I knew for a fact they would take a meeting because I had sold to them before. And I sat down and said, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're doing. Is this something you would be interested in? They asked a lot of questions, and it really helped our go-to-market strategy tremendously for this new vertical we were looking to dive into. There wasn't necessarily a core competency yet, but because, to the point earlier on hiring the right people, being able to hire people that have connections and contacts in verticals you want to go into that will have those friendly, warm conversations and not hold your feet to the fire because you don't quite have it all dialed in yet for that particular vertical, goes a long way in playing catch up and figuring that out, and somebody that wants to see you guys have success. To your point on founder-led sales, some of the best sales experiences I have had were because I was out on the road traveling 40 weeks a year, with some founders. And a lot of times your story, why you're passionate about whatever you're doing, whatever you're bringing to market, your service, your product, and your enthusiasm, that's what people buy. People buy that and what you're going to bring to them. And then having some sales schmuck sitting next to you that's then happy to have the business conversation goes over so much better than me trying to be a pitch guy or a suave salesperson. It goes over so much better because people buy into the enthusiasm. They buy into the emotion. They buy into the founders and the person behind the business. I can't emphasize how powerful the founder's story can be for whatever it is. I don't care if you're selling toilet paper. I don't care if you're selling, biosafety technology, safety equipment, anything at all. The founders-led story and the energy that they bring is super powerful. And you really need to embrace that when you're looking at that. And a lot of times that's probably also how you guys got your initial customers, is your enthusiasm. They might not think you guys have it dialed in quite yet, but they believe in you as a person. And that's something you guys really need to embrace.
All right, I think we have time for about one more question before we go to Q&A. But yeah, well, you talked about this a little bit, how sometimes your early customers are not going to be long-term customers. So how do you use this information to shape your future strategy?
Yeah, I mean, exactly to your point, the first customer is so important because you get so much material out of them, and that's why they're tired. That's why by the end of it they're like, "Hey, we're done." But you get so much out of them that really helps you compound and build like a marketing engine and build like a sales engine. So to your question, to answer your question, I think it's a balance too. It's because when you come out first as a startup, you have an idea of who your ideal customer is, and the reality you're getting a different one. It might not be the same person, but you're still going after this market. So like think about who they are, but also think about like what's interests them, what's unique about them that you can replicate and go toward another industry. What's transferable from one industry to the other. So really focus on that. And again, milk it. Create like different material, marketing material, and so forth. One of the things as well that you can do is during your when you're pitching a new customer, if that initial customer is actually like a raving one, make sure are you willing to be my reference? So when you apply for a job, like sometimes when you apply for a job, then the company called and have a reference like, hey, how does this person is working? It's exactly the same thing when you have when you're selling, they might do back end reference as well. So make sure that you're in good standing.
The references are key, especially as a young startup. People want to know, how are you going to react when things go sideways? And let's face it, as a startup, things are going to go sideways. Your product's not going to work. You're going to trip. You're going to fall. But how do you respond? Everyone expects that you're going to trip and fall, but do you get back up? Do you engage the customer? So references are key because they want to know, I'm putting my neck out here. Are you going to be there for me when things go sideways? Absolutely. References are key. And then along the lines of as the customer profile changes, as your business grows and you start to pivot and you start to deviate from your initial customers, even if they're great and they're the initial references, be okay with firing those original customers. And I say that delicately in that you don't want to just say, see ya, thanks for all the skin in the game, and then we're tired of you. But as your company grows, you can't leave some of the baggage behind that consumes resources. And so I'm looking at our own business today. We've got customers from 5-6 years ago that they're completely different than the customers we're targeting today, and the resources required to support the product for how they're using it is a drain from how we want to take the company. So as founders, you'll have to cross that bridge at one point as far as the early customers that we qualified and we said, yep, we're all in. They're not the customers that will get you where you want to go long term. So be cognizant of that.
I think the only thing I would say was going to add on to the references part was just thinking about, early stage companies, right? Is the references are key, obviously, for that. But then They're also key for when you hit that like mid-stage growth too, because things are going to hit the fan, right? And I've been in those rooms where CEOs like, all right, we're about to hit growth mode, right? And we got, $30 million in funding or whatever it is, and we are really, putting the gas on the fire, right? But things are going to go wrong. They're going to go wrong really quick. And that's when those customers, those references can speak to those people that kind of feel the turmoil on the outside, like that customer that might be on the edge and they're like, all right. Those references really come in handy to say, hey, actually, something went wrong during implementation or actually, in the middle of my contract, right? But they were right there to do it, right? Those references are key in those growth stages as well, when things are 100% going to hit the fan, go haywire, systems are going to go down, customers are going to be really mad. But those are where those references, come into play to kind of quell, I guess, those fears, you could say.
Assume things are going to go south, and you more so will be remembered for and judged by what you do when it hits the fan. And people will either love you and embrace you, and you will have a reference for life, or that's what they will remember, is that you kind of let them hanging out to dry when things didn't go well. And I think that more often than not, that's why I always love to sell based on service and support and how we're going to be there for people, because that's all they care about. They're not going to remember the salesperson who's in the room. They're going to remember the customer success manager or account manager that was right there in the thick of it for whenever something happened with one of these founding accounts or these initial accounts that came on board when you guys were just starting out. People remember those moments. And I think that's really where you can create some of those exuberant raving fans, is those moments. And I think most certainly in your go-to-market strategy, I always tell people all the time, this relationship is not going to be perfect. Something is going to go wrong. I don't know what it is, but at some point, this is not going to be ideal and perfect. And any other person that comes in and tells you this is lying to you. At some point, something's going to happen, and we will be right next to you to figure it out. And that level of confidence, I think, going back to what we've talked about, buyers are so much more educated today than they ever are. People know at some point something's going to happen. And you really will get judged by what your response is. And I think having that in the back of your head is critically important as you go out and you get those founding customers, and as you progress in your business or you pivot your business. I think that's kind of what really people pay attention to, and where you can really leave a positive impression on people, regardless of how big a problem it is. Being responsive, I think, is the best thing you can do with those initial customers.
This is great. Thank you so much, everybody. We have time for about 1 to 2 questions. I'd love to start with the in-person audience here. I'll bring you a microphone. There are going to be some questions in the digital audience that we're not going to be able to answer just now. If anybody wants to share their contact information, wants to be in touch with those people, you can just let us know how to do that at the end. But we'll start with a question over here.
Hi, thank you, everyone. So question about, I'm bootstrapping a startup, so very early stage. I don't have a ton of resources. Question is, if you were selling to SMBs, not big companies, just small, maybe like under 10 people, let's say, and you're selling a SaaS tool, and it's not a entree, it's more of an ancillary tool. And let's say it's not a painkiller, it's not really a need to have. Let's say on a scale of need from 1 to 10, let's say it's like a 5, let's say. What kind of tactics do you have, advice on how to sell such a solution?
Educate. I think you need to educate the market that you're there. If you're not a need to have and you're a 5 out of 10, you need to make sure everybody at the very least knows who you are.
I think you can also make that 5 a 10. So, and it might not be with everybody, right? With every customer, but you could make that 5. Oh, well, I'm having a little bit of, trouble with this, right? We'll dig into that more, right? What's that trouble costing them? Like what's the cost if you don't do anything, right? Or what's this going to do if we implemented this and solve these problems, right? You can make that. It's good. I would say that's a good problem to have, that you're a 5. If you think you're a 5 right now, that's better than being a 1 or a 2, because a 1 or a 2 is a way tougher sell than a 5. I think you're in a good place if you're at a 5, because again, for certain customers, not for everybody, you can make that pain from 5 to a 10. It's just about kind of how you approach that.
Lean into your strengths. Whatever you feel like got you to that 5, lean into that and educate the masses on that.
And I would double down on your internal development. If you've got early adopters, how do you take your product from a 5 to a 10? So you're not just ancillary. How do you become more critical to their process, to their workflows? So instead of investing a lot of resources and trying to, boil the ocean, spend a lot of time with your existing customers, even if it's just a handful of them, and really understand how to make yourself more desirable, more of a 10 versus a 5.
That's a great question to ask those customers too, or those prospects. Hey, let me ask you something. It sounds like we're a nice to have right now. What would make my product a must have for you guys? It's a scary question to ask, and it's an uncomfortable question to ask, but you need to be uncomfortable or comfortable being uncomfortable. That's always one of the best sales leaders that I've ever talked to, is you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And sometimes asking those awkward questions is part of that process, but it's going to get you much further down the road if you do.
Yeah. And to answer your question as well, I feel like the difference between need and must is really, I believe we talked about that a little bit earlier, is the brand equity. And you have it as well at the startup level. Like, we tend to underestimate how much brand equity we actually have. The difference between need and must, it could be at the product level for sure, but you also think about what the problems that you're trying to resolve. So you have your product, great, there is those features, check, you name it. But then what's the problem you're trying to resolve? And then make sure that you are in those conversations. And it could be conversation with different competitors and so forth, but you are there. And you're in this room today. So let's keep going.
Terrific. Thank you so much for the robust discussion. I'm so sorry, we are out of time for questions for today.